Hello, welcome back. It is your Loan Depot with Dyke Girls. I'm Lisa Gustafson.
I'm Shelley Horman.
I'm Erica Benigni.
We are back with another edition of our Wednesday morning coffee talk. This week, I think we have a pretty timely, again, topic, VRBO, or vacation rental, short-term rental versus long-term rentals. So I know during the pandemic, a lot of people escaped for longer-term vacations, and they weren't staying in hotels. It was maybe because they were working remote, they were moving to another city or even a rural area to spend a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks. So that's really boosted the interest in VRBOs. But I think it's kind of been a growing trend for several years now that, it's a more comfortable way to travel and stay a little bit longer. So we thought we'd kind of highlight for you the pros and cons of each. Over 600,000 Americans use online platforms to rent out houses. So that's a huge number. Also, worldwide, there's over 450 million properties that are used as vacation rentals.
Yeah. Amazing.
So they're big here, but they're actually even bigger in Europe. Europe has, I think they maybe adopted this earlier, and so they've really become popular there. So,
So the difference between a short-term and long-term rental, short-term is any property that's rented from 1 day up to 30 days, and then long-term would be 30 days or longer. And so again, we just want to kind of highlight some of the pros and cons of each. From a lending perspective, there's really not a difference whether or not you decide that your home is a short-term rental or long-term. Doesn't change the terms of your mortgage. So it's not something on a purchase. So it's not something you have to decide up front. But we're going to talk about pros and cons.
Yeah, there are definitely pros and cons to a short-term rental versus a long-term rental. So when we're talking about a short-term rental, one of the biggest pros is really the higher potential for rental income. You typically see higher nightly fees on those or weekly fees,
And you can be more flexible.
Yeah.
So you can increase that
for
seasonally.
seasonal.
Absolutely.
So you do have more potential.
Absolutely.
And I think they said 2 to 3 times as much income potential.
Yeah.
So,
And to go along with that flexibility, the owner actually also has the ability to stay in the property, to use it somewhat, whereas if a long-term is rented out, you don't have that same ability. So the cons, when we're talking about the cons of a short-term rental, management fees, that is huge.
Yeah. Up to 30% sign-on charge, depending upon the market. So
yeah.
Whereas a long-term, it's 8 to 10. So
yeah.
2 to 3 times as much income,
right?
2 to 3 times as much expense.
Right.
So
I guess it makes sense, right? It makes sense. Also, when you look at a short-term rental, you're going to have costs to furnish that. People who are in a short-term or looking at VRBOs are basically on a short-term vacation. So those homes need to be furnished, and there's some costs to replace some of those items as well. But it is definitely something to keep in mind. And then probably another significant con that you should look into is the local laws and restrictions, whether or not they allow short-term rental.
Yeah, the HOA, a lot of HOAs require 30 days or more.
Yep.
So you may be limited on how you can really use it as a short-term rental.
Yeah, for sure. So, but if we contrast that with looking at the pros and cons of a longer term rental, long term, you have consistent cash flow. You've got renters in there for 6 months or a year.
Which is why those management fees are much lower as you don't have the turnover. And so you may be able to manage it on your own. You may not have to hire a management company.
Yeah. And it's predictable, right? Once you lock in a lease, you know what you're going to get for 6 months, 12 months. So
right, exactly. But along with that, you also have the ability to pass off utility costs onto the tenants. They typically will pay those if they're in a long-term rental in your spot. When we look at the cons, less availability for owner use. If it's not furnished,
right,
then you can't go stay there.
Yeah,
typically,
even if there's no renter, you're probably going to sleep on the floor.
right. There is lower profit margins because you're bringing in less income with that. And there are fewer or more restrictive tax strategies, potentially with a long-term rental versus a short-term rental. Typically, and we see this a lot in lending, if you have rentals, you're filing those under a Schedule E, which is for passive income. Whereas the short-term rentals, maybe there's a little bit more flexibility to file those as a Schedule C, which is more passive income and can actually, yeah, that's what I meant. Active income is a Schedule C, and it can actually be used to potentially offset some of your other active income.
Yeah, could be a little bit more strategic.
Yeah.
Yeah, so again, you definitely want to consult a tax advisor, have your clients before doing any of that. And, I guess first steps, if you do have clients that you think are interested in buying either investment property or a VRBO, you can do them as little as 15% down, non-owner occupied. And we would love to talk to them and not only get them pre-qualified, but give them a good idea of what their monthly expenses would look like. And then in partnership with real estate community, you can show them what the potential income looks like on that property. And
Short-term or long-term.
Short-term or long-term, exactly.
Yeah.
And then we can help them make a great decision and hopefully find a great home.
Yeah.
So join us next time.
Yep. It's great to see you. Have a good day. Cheers.
Oh.